Welcome to this episode of the Plant Powered Dog podcast. Today, I want to welcome back Professor Andrew Knight to the podcast. Professor Knight has more credentials than I can even name in this introduction, but I'm going to give it a try. Briefly, he is adjunct professor in the School of Environment and Science at Griffith University in Queensland, Australia. He's a visiting lecturer at the University of Winchester in the United Kingdom. He is an EBVS European and RCVS veterinary specialist in animal welfare science, ethics, and law, an American veterinary specialist in animal welfare, a fellow of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and a member of the Australian and New Zealand College of Veterinary Scientists Animal Welfare Chapter. Professor Knight has authored numerous publications, academic articles, and books on animal welfare. He has also delivered hundreds of presentations and social media videos on vegan diets for companion animals and issues surrounding various aspects of human exploitation of animals. Professor Knight is currently the most important driving force for scientific research on the health, welfare, and sustainability of nutritionally sound vegan diets for companion dogs and cats. He continues to publish groundbreaking studies that consider important global realities, that detail essential facts about vegan companion animal diets, and that enable people like myself to work at a grassroots level, transitioning our four-legged friends from meat-based diets to ethical, sustainable, and nutritious plant-based diets. Today, I'm really excited to have Andrew here to discuss his most recent groundbreaking study titled The Relative Benefits for Environmental Sustainability of Vegan Diets for Dogs, Cats, and People. So, welcome back to the Plant Powered Dog podcast, Andrew, and congratulations on the publication of this groundbreaking study. What a massive accomplishment. And I'm sure you're exhausted, so thank you for being here.
Thank you very much indeed for that very kind introduction. I'm originally from Australia, and I'm actually a failed surfer, so I had to drop out, and so this is what I do instead. But I'm hoping to one day pick it up again and be more successful. But for now, this is it.
Well, you deserve to pick it up again now after the work on this study. It's just amazing, and the implications are really truly world changing. I mean, today I want to focus, I've had the pleasure of sitting down and talking with you before, but today I really want to focus on this research, your findings, and the implications for how it will affect how we think about feeding our companion animals and also ourselves, which is interesting because you took that into account too, branching out into how human diets and companion animal diets affect animal welfare and the environment. So first, for those who don't know about the new study, could you just give us a little background of it, when you conceived it and what it's about?
Sure. So I conducted a detailed study of the ingredients used within pet food and also human diets, and was able to calculate what the environmental benefits would be if the world's dogs, cats, and people were to all transition onto nutritionally sound vegan diets. So I looked at the numbers of land animals that are consumed by each of those groups, how many of those would be saved from slaughter, savings of greenhouse gases, land use, water use, pesticides, and also a number of additional people who could be fed with food energy savings. And the results were really quite spectacular.
Yeah, I found the results actually to be kind of astonishing, especially when it came to the number of animals that could be spared and the massive positive environmental impact. Could you go into a little bit more detail about exactly what you found?
Yeah, so I looked at dogs and cats within the United States as the nation with the largest population of pet dogs and cats, and also companion dogs and cats globally. And for the US, I looked at the year 2020 because the previous year was the year in which for the first time, a really large and detailed study of ingredients in pet food was produced. So this is the first time we had good data about what animal and plant ingredients are used in pet food in the US, and what species they come from, what tonnages, and of course what the environmental impacts of all of those was. That could then be determined. It would have been ideal to look at the global population also in 2020, the same year, but there wasn't good data about the global populations of dogs and cats in 2020. So I used the nearest available year, which was 2018, for the global dogs and cats. And I was able to calculate that if all of the world's dogs and cats went on to nutritionally sound vegan diets, we would spare around about 7 billion land animals from being slaughtered each year, probably billions of fish and marine animals as well. You would save vast quantities of greenhouse gases. For example, if all the world's dogs transitioned onto nutritionally sound vegan diets, you would save more greenhouse gases than all of those produced by the entire United Kingdom. In comparison, by the way, for human beings, if all the people transition onto nutritionally sound vegan diets, you would spare around about 71 billion land animals from slaughter and save more greenhouse gases than all of those emitted by the entire European Union. Finally, another really interesting fact was the number of additional people you could feed with the food energy that was saved, because most of the food energy is lost during the conversion from plant protein to animal protein, and which is then ultimately consumed by dogs, cats, and people as animal sourced ingredients within diets. So if you could actually directly consume that plant protein, you'd have enormous food energy savings, actually. So the savings would be, if the world's dogs were transitioned onto nutritionally sound vegan diets, you'd be able to feed about 450 million additional people, which is more than the entire population of the European Union. And for humans, you'd be able to feed another 5.3 billion people, which is around about 2/3 of the current population of the Earth, with the food energy saved. So staggeringly large environmental benefits, and also numbers of additional people that could be fed if the world's dogs, cats, and people are all transitioned onto nutritionally sound vegan diets.
Right, and the land and water resources that could be saved. You mentioned the Amazon forest and what's happening there. Yeah.
Yeah. So if all the world's dogs were transitioned onto nutritionally sound vegan diets, you would free up land larger than Mexico. For humans, you'd free up land larger than Russia, which is the world's largest country, combined with India. So vast quantities of land you wouldn't need to be cutting down for growing feed crops to feed to livestock animals or to graze livestock animals on pasture. And of course, this is one of the biggest consumers of land in the world. So you would save all of that land.
Yeah, it's so inefficient to use crops and land and water to feed animals, to feed other animals and people, right? It's like, let's eliminate the middleman. Seems to make sense.
That's because most of
Right.
the plant produce that you feed to livestock animals doesn't go directly into producing usable muscles, i.e. meat or milk or eggs. Most of it actually goes to simply supporting the bodily processes of livestock animals, growth, maintenance, tissue repair, functions like that, rather than supporting the direct production of usable products for people to consume. So it's a very inefficient process, and most of the energy is lost during the conversion process. This is referred to as the food conversion ratio, and the ratios vary between the species, but they could be as poor as 10-1 in the case of cattle. So you might lose 90% of the inputs during the conversion process, and they improve with pigs, poultry, and fish. But even with fish, you wouldn't get better than 2-1 or 3-1. So you still be losing at least half of what you put in, if not more than that.
And that's true. And you studied the sea animals as well. And you said that they're harder to quantify the losses, but you rank them in the is it millions or billions? I've read
It's
trillions at one
trillions,
point,
yeah.
but
So
yes.
it's harder with fish and aquatic animals because their numbers are counted in tons rather than in numbers of individual animals. But on that basis and on their average weights, you can work out the quantities that are being killed for consumption every year. And it's between 1 to 3 trillion fish species globally, and greater numbers of some other aquatic species. And the quantities used in pet food vary. Within cat food, for example, there's a higher usage of fish than there would be in dog food. But so it becomes harder to actually calculate the amounts. But if we were to conservatively estimate that even just 1% of all of these fish and aquatic animals we use within pet food, which is probably a gross underestimate, then the numbers of aquatic animals will be in the billions that are being killed each year for use in pet food.
Just in pet food.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So obviously these numbers are disturbing, they're staggering. But what do you think the significance is? I guess what do you hope the significance will be, and what do you think it will be of this
Well,
study?
we have understood for quite some years, those of us who study these issues, that the livestock sector is one of the largest consumers of land and fresh water and producers of greenhouse gases, probably around about the second largest producer of greenhouse gases after fossil fuel burning for energy production. So we've understood that that is major, and we've always assumed that that is attributable to human diets and human consumption of livestock animals. What this study shows is that actually the consumption of animals within pet food is a major part of this. Globally, it's at least 9% of all livestock produce consumption, probably significantly more. Within a wealthy nation such as the United States, it's at least 20%, and again, probably significantly more. So it's not negligible. It is actually a major component of livestock animal consumption, and the consumption of all these animal body parts by dogs and cats does need to be considered when we thinking about environmental sustainability and looking at whether the food system should change. Clearly, it should change. We know that business as usual is not an option if we are to address the major challenges of climate change and environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. We can't carry on doing things as we've always done them. We need to be looking at systemic changes in sectors such as energy production and also the food system, the largest consumers of land, fresh water, the largest producers of greenhouse gases. These are the sectors we need to be looking at, and that absolutely includes the livestock sector as one of the top priorities. So this study shows that it's important that we do that for dogs and cats and not just for humans. And the other studies in this broader field that I've been doing and my scientific colleagues have also been doing have been looking at health outcomes and behavioural outcomes of dogs and cats maintained on nutritionally sound vegan diets. And they have also been establishing that the health outcomes are generally as good or better, providing that the diets are nutritionally sound for dogs and cats. And behaviourally, as far as we can tell from studying their behaviour, they seem to enjoy these diets on average just as much as they enjoy traditional meat-based pet foods as well. So that's all really good news for dogs and cats, but also for environmental sustainability. It opens up the option of making major differences to the environment, to the climate change problem, if we could simply transition our dogs and cats onto nutritionally sound vegan diets, which would probably also bring about better health outcomes for them in some cases as well.
I've seen that myself for sure since 2018, and I've seen staggering, really health benefits transitioning them. And for me, there were several surprises in the data of this study. Maybe not for you, but for me there were. And one of the biggest surprises for me was that we've long been kind of taught that byproducts are a good thing in pet foods because they recycle parts that would otherwise go to waste from the human food industry. So, we're really not harming any more animals because they would just be discarded. So you actually found that that's not correct, and that non-human grade uh, products in pet foods contribute significantly. Could you just explain that?
Yeah, that was one of the exciting outcomes of this study. You're very right in describing how we have understood the use of byproducts up until now, but this study enabled me to look at the ingredients that were used in dog and cat food in detail and work out what proportion were coming from byproducts and which were coming from meat and other ingredients that could have been consumed directly by humans. With respect to the byproducts of animals being slaughtered for human consumption, I was able to look at the actual species that were being used and then go and find the research telling us how much of the carcasses of those different livestock animals and poultry go into producing byproducts and how much go into producing meat. And it was able to work out how many average livestock animals you needed in order to supply all of those byproducts and all of the meat-based ingredients. And it turned out that more livestock animals are required to produce all of the byproducts than actually for the meat and the ingredients that are consumable by people. So it's a less efficient process. So that was very interesting. The second thing I was able to determine was that if these byproducts were not used in pet food, they wouldn't go to landfill. It's not beneficial recycling of products that would otherwise be wasted. As a matter of fact, the animal byproducts are used in a wide range of other social industries, varying from pharmaceuticals to consumer products to household products to products that could be consumed by people with further processing. There's a very wide range of social uses of animal byproducts. The pet food industry is a minority consumer of them. Probably only about a quarter of all of these byproducts are consumed by pet food. If the pet food industry didn't consume these byproducts, they would actually be consumed by the other industries that make use of them. The use in byproducts simply drives up the overall price of these ingredients, but it's still significantly cheaper than using meat that could be consumed by people, which is why there is still a high usage of byproducts in pet food. It's something that lowers the cost of pet food. It doesn't improve the quality. Obviously, it lowers the quality of pet food that pets are consuming. And it increases the number of average livestock animals that are being required to be killed to produce byproducts. So it actually increases the environmental impact. It doesn't decrease it, and it's not beneficial recycling.
That's really interesting because it's just contrary to everything we've been, taught.
Exactly. Yeah. There are some indications in scientific literature along similar lines, but there's been very little attention given to them. So we've all erroneously thought, as you have described, that byproduct use is beneficial recycling. Obviously, I was able to identify that's incorrect and quantify how incorrect that is and how inefficient byproduct production is. And that was consistent with these previous mentions in the scientific literature that had received very little attention so far.
And another thing that really surprised me was, obviously the statistics, the numbers you're giving are staggering and they're so impactful, but you actually discuss how you might be even really underestimating the impact. And that's due to how you calculated, one of the reasons is due to how you calculated the actual number of dogs and cats consuming these foods. And could you just talk about that and how the effects might be so much greater than you even found?
Sure. So this study used 2018 global populations for dogs and cats, and that is kept dogs and cats, not counting the stray and free roaming animals, many of whom are also fed pet food, for example, by cat colony carers. So none of that's been included. So actually the impacts of pet food would be even higher than just looking at the kept dogs and cats. Globally, those kept numbers came from 2018. In the United States, they came from 2020. The current numbers of dogs and cats would be higher in both groups because pet ownership is increasing worldwide. So that's the first way in which the impacts of pet food have been underestimated compared to what they truly would be today. Another way would be that the energy required by dogs and cats, the dietary energy would have increased since those points in time, because unfortunately the animals are becoming ever more overweight and obese, and that actually increases daily energy requirements. Another way is that for dogs and cats, I use the average body weights of dogs and cats, but I didn't do that for humans. For humans, I used the age group that had the greatest energy requirements. It wasn't an average for all people. So the age group was 19 to 64-year-old humans, adults. And for men, they had a daily energy requirement of 2,500 kilocalories. For women, it was 2,000 kilocalories. So I picked the greatest possible energy requirements for humans, but an average for dogs or cats. So I was effectively overestimating the energy consumption of humans compared to dogs or cats. So those are some of the ways in which the estimations of the impacts of pet food have been are lower than what they truly would be. Additionally to that, there were multiple points in the calculations where we didn't have information or good enough information, and I had a range of choices that I could pick, and I always pick the most conservative option, the one that would give us the least impacts for pet food. So we know, therefore, that the results underestimate the impacts, and that the true effects of pet food would be higher than very conservatively estimated in this study. And yet, even those very conservative estimations are quite staggering. They show us that there are major environmental impacts of pet food, and also major benefits to environmental sustainability that are available through the use of nutritionally sound vegan diets.
So I had several aha moments reading this that I mentioned to you, and maybe for you they were the same. But did you have any other particular aha, light bulb moments when you were doing this research that maybe you didn't expect? Or?
I think one of the key ones was, as you've pointed out, the really surprising result that actually the use of animal byproducts in food increased the dietary ecological paw print. It didn't decrease the ecological paw print. And secondarily, I suppose, just the sheer size of the environmental impacts of all of this animal ingredients, animal source ingredients within pet food, and what the savings would be when they were replaced by plant-based ingredients, because no one's calculated that before. And you can't simply get rid of the animal impacts and have a result. You need to replace it with the impacts that would still be there if you use plant-based ingredients. You need to work out what the difference is, and nobody had done that before. And even when I did all of that, the differences resulted in massive environmental savings and food energy savings. So that was exciting. There was also a very big difference between dogs and cats, and it clearly showed that the focus for environmental sustainability needs to be on dogs, and especially medium to large breed dogs. I reviewed all of the other studies that had been conducted in this field so far, and they're described in the discussion. And one of those noted quite large differences between, say, large breed dogs and toy breed dogs. I think the differences in environmental impact were around about 12 to 1. So there can be, and the environmental impacts of the large and giant breeds can be greater than those of people. So because of the much bigger consumption of animal produce by these very large dogs. So yes, all dogs are not the same. Dogs on average are much more consequential than cats in terms of the impacts of the commercial pet food that they consume. And there are really enormous environmental sustainability benefits for transitioning all of these groups, dogs, cats, and people as well. Cats are not inconsequential. If we were to transition all of them onto nutritionally sound vegan diets, we'd be able to feed more people than the entire United Kingdom population with the food energy savings, and free up land larger than Germany. So cats are not inconsequential, but they're just completely eclipsed by the savings associated with transitioning dogs onto nutritionally sound vegan diets.
Well, like you say, dogs can be as large as people, and whereas a human omnivore might eat a salad one night for dinner and pasta another night, the dog, I know from when I was formulating these diets, it's just meat, 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 meat every day, day in and day out, and especially with the raw food feeding movement. It's tremendous amounts of meat that they consume.
And
So,
if you're looking the other way and the dog does eat your salad or pasta dinner, it's still going to turn up at its food bowl later on, denying all knowledge and demanding more of that same diet that you were just describing. So it's not going to
yeah,
decrease their environmental impacts.
no, exactly. So, I mean, this is all, I mean, I think for the discerning mind, this is, you know, sure makes a lot of sense and it's very convincing. Obviously, when you know that there are a lot of people out there who have beliefs about how dogs and cats should eat, what sort of resistance have you gotten or do you expect to get from this study?
Yeah, there are two main concerns that people have, and that is, will their animals be healthy on vegan diets? And the other one is, will they be happy if they have been used to eating meat, as most of them have been? So with respect to the first point, health, there are now 9 studies in dogs and indeed 3 on cats showing that for animals maintained on these diets, and in some cases we're talking about thousands of animals and long-term studies, the health outcomes seem to be as good or better. The benefits are very consistent across all of the studies, and there have been no studies that other than the oldest, smallest study with the least realistic sample size in dogs. There is one study in dogs, and there's one in cats in which a diet that was formulated to be deficient in potassium resulted in signs of potassium deficiency eventually. But apart from those studies, there are no studies that show any contrary results. So virtually all of the studies around have shown health outcomes as good or better. Sometimes they're quite striking. A study published last year of nearly 1,200 dogs showed that the previously owned dogs live for an average of 1.5 years longer if they were on a vegan diet. And that's like a person living about an extra decade at the end of their lifespan, which is clearly a really big difference. And they're not just living longer, they're having better quality of lives because they seem to have lower rates of itchy skin, ear canal problems, things which adversely impact their quality of life. And they tend to have reduction in being overweight or obese and better mobility and reduction in musculoskeletal disorders as well. So these are the sorts of benefits that are coming up consistently across multiple studies. So it's very exciting for the welfare of dogs and cats. It translates into cost savings for people because we have calculated in our research what are the reductions in needing medication, needing to visit veterinarians, reduction in rates of illness. All of those things translate into economic savings for the pet parents that have to pay for those bills. And the second point was the happiness of these animals eating their diets, and that's been studied in a range of smaller studies, but also a big one that we published 2 years ago, looking at the behavioural outcomes of more than 2,300 dogs and 1,100 cats. Looking at every behavioural indicator that had ever been identified of how much animals enjoyed their different diets. And we looked at the extent to which these were consistent and different between plant-based and meat-based diets. And we found that on average, dogs and indeed cats consuming nutritionally sound vegan diets seem to be enjoying their meals as much as those eating traditional meat-based diets as well. So that really addresses the key concerns that people have, concerns about health and happiness of their animals. And there only seem to be benefits. There certainly aren't disadvantages with respect to health and behavior.
And obviously, you studied and you do study cats as well as dogs. I admittedly, am a dog nutritionist. I don't study cats. I am very interested, though, in what you're finding. And so, because we've talked a lot about cats, and I've actually had more and more people asking me about plant-based diets for cats, could you talk a little bit about another recent study that you just published and what it found on the health benefits of vegan diets, nutritionally sound vegan diets for cats?
Yeah. So we studied health outcomes in 1,369 cats. So that's a really large scale study, the largest so far, actually. And we looked at the prevalence of general indicators of illness and also specific health disorders in all of these cats. And then we looked at the diets that they were on, whether they were on vegan diets or meat-based diets. And we found that for average cats, so I should say that we first controlled for differences between the dietary groups in age, sex, cat location, indoors, outdoors, and so on. And after controlling for all of those, we then worked out the chances for an average cat, average age, average sex, average location, so on, of showing signs of illness. And this was lower for cats fed vegan diets than for cats fed meat-based diets. And we calculated what the risks were and what the reduction in risks of these adverse outcomes was with the vegan diet. And the reduction in risk of general indicators of illness, so that is things like how likely the cats were to need medication or to visit vets an unusually high number of times, which might indicate treatment for an illness. All of these sorts of things, the reductions in those sorts of things for cats on a vegan diet varied from about 4 up to about 55%. That was quite substantial. We also looked at the 22 most common health disorders in cats, and we found that 15 of those were most common in cats fed meat, and 7 of those were most common in cats fed vegan diets. Almost none of these differences were statistically significant, but collectively they constitute a strong trend, indicating that the cats fed vegan diets they had a tendency towards having better health outcomes, actually. They certainly didn't have worse health outcomes. So that's very exciting for people that are interested in health and well-being of their cats, and of course environmental sustainability too, because it opens up the possibility of us being able to achieve all of the environmental benefits mentioned for cats if we feed them nutritionally sound diets, vegan diets.
And I know, yes, and I know that when people contact me, their kind of last bit of holding on to purchasing and touching animal parts, meat, is to feed in my case, to feed their dog. And there's an immense amount of sort of freedom, I think, that is, related to being able to give that up. And it feels, I think, really good. So your studies, your research are really helping so many people on a grassroots level to have the confidence to, stop purchasing meat, stop handling meat, and still feel confident that they'll have what they want, healthy, happy animal companions. So it's just so important. I know it's having the effect on a grassroots level. I hear it. I hope that it's going to have the effect on the pet food industry in general. What do you think about that? I mean, how do you see this in the next 5-10 years? Do you think that these studies are making their way through, to that world? I'm sure they are, but are they really resonating?
Yeah. So most of this research has just been published within the last 2 years. Some of it is still forthcoming. And it has still to trickle down to the pet owning world. There is a lot of interest. There has been a lot of coverage of the recent studies you've mentioned, which is fantastic. And I've seen an explosion of new vegan pet food brands being developed by companies and brought to market, which is great. Nevertheless, it's still difficult in some parts of the world to get access to them, and we need more of them. We know that convenience for consumers is a key determinant of what they choose to buy. So it's important that these products do become available, and they are increasingly becoming available easily around the world. But I expect that concerns about climate change, greenhouse gases, environmental sustainability are only going to increase, not decrease. This has got to be one of the easiest predictions I'll ever make. Accordingly, interest in the environmental benefits associated with plant-based diets, which are incredibly clear and supported by amazingly consistent, strong evidence, will become of increasing interest. Those benefits are being clearly reported for human diets, and now we have this study quantifying how big those benefits will be for animal diets as well. So I would expect the transition onto these diets to gather pace. And the main factor, I think, holding the tide back at the moment would be lack of awareness of all of this new scientific information that's recently become available in the last 2 years. As I say, that's changing. It's being widely reported. There is a lot of interest, but most of the pet owning world still would not yet be aware. And lack of product availability, that's changing too as companies pile in and bring new products to market. However, we need more of them still. So should be a very exciting growth area and a great space to watch, I think, for the future.
And I think another important aspect of all of this, and I hope that your studies will really resonate with veterinarians, because that's another story that I hear often from my clients, is that their veterinarians, not all, but many, are staunchly against even nutritionally sound vegan diets, that, you know, they have, depending on how strong their opinions are, they're either a little against it, or they've even gone so far as to really say some pretty fantastical things, you know, to my clients on the topic. Do you see this changing? Do you see these studies affecting the industry, which seems to be sort of slow moving in this regard?
Yes, I do. The British Veterinary Association is currently revising their position on this issue based upon all of the new evidence that has come to light. I had the pleasure of presenting to them recently, summarising a lot of this research, and they seemed very open to learning about it. And environmental sustainability is certainly an important concern to them and to the, I suppose, the broader veterinary profession as well. UK Pet Food, which is the Pet Food Manufacturers Association in the United Kingdom, has recently revised its fact sheet on vegan and vegetarian diets, which you can find on their website, affirming that these are legitimate products and good products when they're formulated to be nutritionally sound, and some of their member manufacturer companies are making those as well. So that's progress. Most veterinarians are not aware of all of this research because they are so busy. They don't even have time to read a lot of their own veterinary journals, let alone read wider journals where this research has been reported. Veterinarians are certainly taught to be open to good scientific evidence and to try to adopt evidence-based positions. The key misunderstanding seems to be that the assumption that people are making their own vegan diets at home and not purchasing diets which have been formulated by responsible companies to be nutritionally sound, hopefully working with veterinary nutritionists and other nutritional experts to produce diets that are nutritionally sound. So a lot of veterinarians just not aware that those diets exist, and that there has been a major change in this area recently, many more of these diets becoming available, and also not aware of the evidence concerning positive health outcomes and other positive benefits of these diets. So it would be very helpful if veterinary journals could briefly summarise this research and report it, because vets have some time to read those journals. But for people seeing veterinarians, I would suggest not printing out the entire article and taking them to your vet, because they won't have any time to read it, but perhaps printing out the abstract, the front page, and taking that or several of those if you want to include some of the health outcome studies as well. Those would be the most important ones for vets. Take them along and explain that a lot of recent research has occurred in this area. Our understanding is changing, has changed. We now understand that the studies in this field show health outcomes which are as good or better for animals, providing the diets are formulated to be nutritionally sound. If a vet still won't listen to that very reasoned argument, then clearly you need to find another vet. But many of them should be or will be open to that kind of reasoned argument and brief provision of information.
I agree. Yeah, they should be scientists and they should be open-minded. And that's why it's important to get these studies out for me to get them out to, on a grassroots level, to my clients and to my followers, because I think that is how you can affect a lot of change as well. Just, you know, coming from what people want, from what the veterinarians' clients want for their animals. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do, which allows people like me to do what I do. And that's huge. It's huge for the health of our animals, which you've shown, of our, for me, the health of the dogs, that my canine clients that I've seen since 2018 with amazing health benefits. It's amazing for all animals who will be spared and be able to live, which is what they want to do. And it's so important for the future of our world, and future generations. So thank you once again. I know you're one of the busiest human beings that there are, and you always take the time out to talk to us, and I really appreciate it. So keep those studies coming. Don't go surfing just yet. Keep them coming. So
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks so much for your help in getting the word out to pet guardians everywhere. Thank you.